New Mexico Territory, 1872. The first rays of morning light filtered through the curtains of the Hoffman residence, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. Amelia Hoffman stood by the window, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she gazed out at the bustling streets of Santa Fe. Her hand rested protectively over her swollen belly, feeling the gentle movements of the child within. "Another dinner party tonight, my dear," Theodore announced, adjusting his cravat in the mirror. "The Hendersons and the Millers will be joining us. Important connections for the store's expansion." Amelia nodded dutifully, though her thoughts were elsewhere. At 7 months with child, she found the endless social obligations exhausting. Still, she was the wife of Theodore Hoffman, the most prosperous merchant in the territory. Their home was the envy of Santa Fe society, their marriage the standard to which others aspired. "Of course, Theodore. I'll speak with Consuela about the menu," she replied, her voice soft and refined, just as she had been taught at her finishing school back east. Theodore approached her, placing a perfunctory kiss on her forehead. "That's my girl. Always prepared, always perfect." After he left, Amelia remained by the window, watching as Theodore made his way down the street toward his store. From the outside, her life was golden. A beautiful home, a successful husband, and soon a child to complete their family. Yet beneath the polished surface, she felt a hollowness she dared not name. The pains came in the dead of night, 2 weeks early. "Push, Mrs. Hoffman, I can see the head," the midwife urged. Amelia screamed, her body contorted in agony as she fought to bring her child into the world. Theodore paced in his study downstairs, flinching at each cry that echoed through the house. "Once more, Mrs. Hoffman, just once more." With a final guttural scream, Amelia felt her body release. The room fell silent, no wailing cry, no announcement of a son or daughter. Just silence. "Why isn't he crying?" Amelia gasped, struggling to sit up. "Why isn't my baby crying?" The midwife and her assistant exchanged glances heavy with sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hoffman," the midwife whispered, cradling a small, still bundle. The cord was wrapped around his neck. "Your son, he never drew breath." Amelia's world collapsed. The golden life she had built crumbled to ash in an instant. Her son, her beautiful, perfect son, was gone before she ever held him. When Theodore was finally allowed to enter the room, he found his wife cradling the lifeless body of their child, singing a lullaby through her tears. "He has your nose," she whispered, looking up at her husband with eyes glazed with grief. "And your strong chin." Theodore stood frozen, unable to approach. The loss of his son, his heir, was a wound too deep, too raw. In that moment something broke between them, a fracture that would never truly heal. They buried little Thomas James Hoffman the next day in the cemetery behind the church. Amelia placed a single white rose on the tiny coffin before it was lowered into the ground. Theodore stood beside her, rigid and distant, his grief turning inward rather than reaching out to his wife. As the months passed, the distance between them grew. Theodore buried himself in his business, expanding his stores and purchasing more land along the Rio Grande. Amelia drifted through their home like a ghost, her body recovered, but her spirit still tethered to the small grave behind the church. The whispers began subtly at first, sidelong glances at church, conversations that stopped when she entered a room. In a small community like Santa Fe, gossip spread like wildfire, and Amelia's failure to produce a living heir had somehow transformed from tragedy to scandal. "Have you noticed how often she visits the Apache trading post?" one woman whispered to another after Sunday service. "I heard Theodore found her sketching one of those savages," came the reply. "Unnatural interest, if you ask me." The truth was far more innocent. In her grief, Amelia had found solace in art, sketching the landscapes and people of her adopted home. The native traders who came to town fascinated her, their dignity, their connection to the land, so different from the artificial constraints of her society. Theodore, however, noticed the whispers. His pride, already wounded by the loss of his son, could not bear the tarnish on his reputation. "You will cease your visits to the trading post," he commanded one evening. "People are talking, Amelia. My business depends on my standing in this community." "They're just sketches, Theodore," she protested. "Art is the only thing that brings me any peace since—" "Since Thomas," he finished, his voice hard. "We all have our burdens to bear, Amelia. Bear yours with dignity, not by causing further scandal." She bowed her head. another piece of her spirit crumbling away. 3 weeks later, Theodore rode out to inspect a disputed water claim on land he'd recently purchased. He never returned. The news came at dusk. Theodore Hoffman had been shot dead during a confrontation with a neighboring rancher over water rights. Amelia received the news in silence, too numb to even weep. The husband she had known was already gone months ago, replaced by a cold, distant stranger consumed by ambition and grief. At the funeral, she stood alone. The same society women who had once fawned over her invitations now kept their distance, their whispers growing bolder. They say she drove him to it. All those visits to the Apache traders. Unnatural interest. Poor Theodore. She couldn't even give him a living son. Within weeks of Theodore's death, his cousins from back east arrived, armed with documents and lawyers. They claimed Theodore had modified his will after Thomas's death, leaving the business and most properties to them, rather than his barren wife. Whether the documents were genuine or forged, Amelia had neither the strength nor the resources to fight them. By winter, she found herself dispossessed with only a small stipend that barely covered her needs. The society that had once embraced her now shunned her completely, doors closing in her face, shops refusing her custom. "We don't serve Apache lovers here," the shopkeeper spat when she tried to purchase supplies. The accusation had grown from innocent sketches to full-blown rumors of infidelity with Apache men, whispers that her betrayal had somehow led to Theodore's death. The absurdity of it would have made her laugh if it hadn't destroyed her life so completely. With nowhere else to turn, Amelia used the last of her money to purchase a small abandoned cabin on the outskirts of town, near the foothills where the territory's jurisdiction faded into the wild lands. There, among the sage and juniper, she rebuilt a semblance of life, tending a small garden, gathering herbs, trading her sketches for essentials with the few traders willing to deal with her. Alone but finally free from society's judgments, Amelia found a strange peace in her solitude. The woman who had once been the toast of Santa Fe society now lived by her own hands, her fine dresses replaced by practical cotton, her elaborate hairstyles given way to a simple braid down her back, until the day the soldiers came and the sound of gunfire shattered the desert silence. The distant crack of rifles pulled Amelia from her sleep before dawn. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto her small porch, watching as orange flames licked the pre-dawn sky to the north, where she knew an Apache encampment lay in a protected canyon. "Heavens," she whispered, a hand flying to her mouth as more shots rang out. The violence between settlers and natives had been escalating for months. The newspapers in town painted every Apache as a bloodthirsty savage, conveniently ignoring broken treaties and stolen lands. Amelia, living on the boundary between worlds, had seen enough to question these simplistic narratives. She should turn away, go back inside, bolt her door. This wasn't her fight, yet something pulled her toward the chaos. Perhaps the same instinct that had once led her to sketch faces others refused to see as human. Grabbing her shawl and a small bag with medical supplies, herbs, bandages and salves she'd learned to make over her months of solitude, Amelia set out toward the glow of flames. The scene that greeted her made her stomach turn. The small encampment had been razed, teepees still smoldering, bodies lying where they had fallen. No soldiers remained. This had been a swift, brutal strike, not a battle. "Hello?" she called out cautiously. "Is anyone alive? I can help." Only the desert wind answered her, carrying the acrid smell of smoke and death. Swallowing her fear, Amelia moved through the ruins, checking for survivors. Most were women, children, and elders. The warriors had likely been away, perhaps the very reason the soldiers had chosen this moment to attack. She was about to turn back when she heard it, a thin, reedy cry, barely audible over the crackle of dying flames. Following the sound, she came upon a devastating scene. 2 women lying motionless on the ground, their bodies positioned as if they had tried to protect something between them. The cry came again, and Amelia gasped. Nestled between the women was a baby, no more than a few months old, face red with exertion as it wailed. "Goodness gracious," she breathed, kneeling beside the child. With trembling hands, she checked the women, one older, perhaps a grandmother, and one younger, likely the mother. Neither showed signs of life. The baby, however, was very much alive, though clearly hungry and frightened. Amelia lifted the child gently, cradling it against her chest. "Shh, little one. You're safe now." As if recognizing comfort and safety, the baby's cries softened to whimpers. Amelia rocked gently, murmuring soothing words, when she felt a strange sensation in her chest, a tingling, then a wetness. Looking down in astonishment, she saw milk had soaked through her cotton dress. "Impossible," she whispered. Yet it wasn't. She had heard of such things, women whose bodies responded to a child's need even years after losing their own. Her body, still mourning the child she had lost, was now offering life to this orphaned baby. Without hesitation, Amelia loosened her dress and brought the hungry child to her breast. The baby latched immediately, tiny hands kneading against her skin as it nursed. Tears streamed down Amelia's face, tears of grief for her own lost son, for this child's murdered family, and tears of wonder at the miracle taking place. "I'll keep you safe," she promised the nursing infant. "Somehow I'll—" The sound of approaching hoofbeats cut her words short. Clutching the baby protectively, Amelia looked up to see a lone rider appearing through the smoke. An Apache warrior, his face streaked with dust and blood, his eyes wild with fear and rage. Ahanu had ridden through the night, his heart pounding with dread. He and the other warriors had been drawn away by reports of soldiers to the south, a deception, he now realized, to leave the camp vulnerable. By the time they discovered the ruse, it was too late. He had broken from the others, riding alone toward the encampment, where he had left his wife, his mother, and his infant son. The glow of flames on the horizon had only spurred him faster, though in his heart he already knew what he would find. Nothing could have prepared him for the devastation. Bodies of his people scattered like broken dolls, their homes reduced to ash. Dismounting, he moved through the ruins in shock, calling softly in his native tongue for his family. When he found the bodies of his wife and mother, something broke inside him. He fell to his knees, a primal cry of anguish tearing from his throat. His gentle wife, who had given him a son just 4 moons past. His wise mother, who had taught him the old ways, the stories of their people. But where was his son? Rising to his feet, wild with grief, Ahanu scanned the area and froze. There, amid the devastation, sat a white woman with golden hair, his son cradled against her breast, nursing. Rage exploded within him. In 3 long strides, he was upon her, knife drawn, ready to exact vengeance for his people on this settler woman who dared to touch his child. "White devil," he snarled in broken English, raising his blade. Amelia didn't flinch. She met his gaze steadily, still cradling the nursing child. "He was alone," she said simply. "I couldn't leave him." Ahanu hesitated, his knife still raised. The woman made no move to flee or to shield herself, only the child, whom she turned slightly away from the blade. "Take my life if you must," she continued, her voice steady despite her fear. "But please, let me finish feeding your son first." His son. She knew this was his child, yet she had chosen to save him. Ahanu lowered his knife slightly, confusion warring with his rage. "Why?" he demanded. "Why would you, a white woman, save an Apache child?" Amelia looked down at the nursing infant, then back to the warrior's face. "Because he is a child. Because he was hungry. Because—" Her voice broke. "Because I lost my own son before he drew his first breath. I couldn't bear to see another innocent life extinguished." Something in her words, in the raw pain behind them, reached through Ahanu's grief. He lowered his knife completely, then sank to his knees beside the bodies of his wife and mother. "Nadia," he said, gently touching his wife's face. "Taki," he added, his hand moving to his mother's grey hair. His voice was thick with emotion as he spoke words in his native tongue. A prayer, Amelia realized, for the journey of their spirits. The baby had finished nursing and now slept peacefully against Amelia's chest. She adjusted her dress and watched as the warrior grieved, feeling like an intruder on his private pain. "I should go," she said softly, making to rise. "No," Ahanu said sharply, looking up. "Soldiers will return, to count their kills. If they find him—" He nodded toward his son. "Or me." Understanding dawned on Amelia. "Come with me," she said. "My cabin is not far. You can bury your family properly when it's safe, and your son will have shelter until then." Ahanu studied her face, searching for deceit and finding none. In the distance they could hear voices, soldiers returning, just as he had predicted. "What is your name?" he asked, rising to his feet. Amelia Hoffman." "I am Ahanu." He reached for his son, and Amelia transferred the sleeping infant to his arms. The warrior held the child with surprising gentleness, whispering words she couldn't understand against the baby's forehead. "His name?" she asked. "Tadi," Ahanu replied. "It means wind." Ahanu handed Tadi back to Amelia, then quickly gathered a few items from the bodies of his wife and mother: a beaded necklace, a small medicine pouch, a blanket embroidered with symbols she didn't recognize. "For him," he explained, "to know his mother, his grandmother." Amelia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "We must hurry." Together, they slipped away from the smoldering camp, Amelia leading the way back to her cabin as the voices of the returning soldiers grew louder behind them. Amelia's cabin was small but solid, built by some forgotten settler who had either moved on or perished in the harsh territory. She had made it her own over the months, herbs hanging from the rafters, sketches pinned to the walls, a small bed in one corner, and a cooking area in another. It was here that the unlikely trio found themselves, as the sun rose fully over the New Mexico landscape. Ahanu stood rigid by the window, watching for any sign of pursuit, while Amelia settled Tadi in a makeshift cradle she had fashioned from a wooden box lined with her softest linens. "No one comes here," she assured him. "The town shuns me. They think well, it doesn't matter what they think." Ahanu turned from the window, his dark eyes studying her. "Why does your people cast you out?" Amelia busied herself with lighting the stove. "My husband died. There were rumors, ugly ones." She looked up with a bitter smile. "Ironically, they accused me of being with Apache men, betraying my husband. None of it true, of course, but truth matters little when people wish to believe the worst." A sound escaped Ahanu that might have been a laugh in any other circumstance. "So they cast you out for lying with my people, and now you shelter one of us." "Life has strange paths," Amelia agreed. "Are you hungry? I have cornbread and some dried venison." Ahanu hesitated, then nodded. He had not eaten since before the false alarm that had drawn the warriors away from camp. While Amelia prepared a simple meal, he moved to the cradle where Tadi slept peacefully. "He is all that remains," he said quietly. "All that remains of my line." Amelia set a plate on the small table. "He lives because of you," she said, "because you survived to protect him." "He lives because of you," Ahanu countered, turning to face her. "Why did your milk come for a child not yours?" Amelia touched her chest self-consciously. "I don't know. It happens sometimes, I'm told, when a woman who has recently lost a child encounters another in need." She swallowed hard. "My son was stillborn 8 months ago. Theodore, my husband, he never recovered from the loss. Neither did I suppose." Ahanu sat at the table, studying the simple fare before him. "The spirits work in ways we cannot understand," he finally said. "Perhaps your son's spirit guided you to mine." The notion brought tears to Amelia's eyes. It was a more comforting thought than anything the preacher had offered at Thomas's funeral. They ate in silence, two souls from different worlds, united by loss and the sleeping child who somehow belonged to them both. As days turned into weeks, an uneasy routine developed. Ahanu would slip away at dawn to hunt or to visit the burial site where he had laid his family to rest under cover of darkness. Amelia tended to Tadi, her body continuing to provide milk for the growing infant, who thrived despite the circumstances of his survival. Gradually, the silence between them gave way to conversation. Ahanu, Amelia learned, had been educated at a mission school before returning to his people, rejecting the white man's ways, but keeping his knowledge of English. He was the son of a chief, trained as both a warrior and a healer. "Your people see only that we fight," he told her one evening as they sat before the fire. "They do not see why we fight. For our children, for our way of life, for the promises broken time and again." "Not all white people are the same," Amelia said softly. "No," Ahanu agreed, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "You are not like the others." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition and understanding that transcended the boundaries of their separate worlds. The first real crisis came when Tadi developed a fever. The baby wailed inconsolably, his small body burning hot to the touch. Amelia tried every remedy she knew, but nothing seemed to help. "He needs medicine," Ahanu said, his usual stoic demeanor cracking with worry. "Medicine from my people." "Tell me what to look for," Amelia offered. "I can gather plants, herbs." "No," Ahanu cut her off. "These grow only in the high places where the eagles nest. I must go." "The soldiers are still searching for survivors," she protested. "If they find you—" "If I do not go, my son dies," he said simply. "I will return by nightfall." Amelia watched him ride away on the mare she had purchased months ago with the last of her savings, her heart heavy with fear. Fear for Ahanu, fear for the child who had become precious to her. Throughout the day she bathed Tadi with cool cloths, singing softly to him as his fever raged. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. "Your father will return. We won't lose you too." As dusk fell with no sign of Ahanu, Amelia's worry deepened. Had he been captured? Killed? What would become of Tadi if Ahanu never returned? And what would become of her? The thought startled her. When had this Apache warrior and his son become so essential to her existence? It was well past midnight when the sound of approaching hoofbeats jerked Amelia from her anxious vigil. She grabbed the rifle she kept by the door, a parting gift from one of the few traders who had shown her kindness, and peered into the darkness. Ahanu practically fell from the horse, his shirt torn and bloody. "What happened?" she gasped, rushing to support him. "Soldiers," he grunted. "On the ridge. But I have what Tadi needs." He pressed a small pouch into her hands. "Brew this, give him small sips." As Amelia prepared the medicine, Ahanu collapsed in a chair, grimacing as he examined a deep gash in his side. "Let me see," Amelia insisted, once she had administered the medicine to Tadi. "It is nothing." "It is not nothing," she countered, already gathering clean cloths and her small supply of medical items. "Remove your shirt." To her surprise, Ahanu complied without further argument. The wound was deep but clean. A bullet had grazed his ribs, tearing flesh but breaking no bones. As Amelia cleaned and dressed the wound, she was acutely aware of Ahanu watching her, his breathing steady, despite what must have been considerable pain. "You have healer's hands," he said quietly. "I've had practice," she replied, focusing on her task to hide the flush that crept up her neck. "Living alone, one learns to tend to oneself." "You are not alone now," Ahanu said. The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. By morning, Tadi's fever had broken. The child gurgled happily as Amelia changed his wrappings, seemingly unaware of the night's drama. Ahanu, despite his injury, insisted on rising to check on his son. "The medicine worked," Amelia said, smiling as Tadi gripped her finger with surprising strength. "It was not only the medicine," Ahanu replied, watching them together. "It was your care. Your love." The word hung between them, unexpected and powerful. "He is easy to love," Amelia said softly. "Yes," Ahanu agreed, but his eyes were not on his son. The day of reckoning came with the first snow. Amelia had ventured into town, disguised under a heavy shawl, to trade her sketches for supplies they desperately needed. Upon her return, she found Ahanu packing his few belongings. "What are you doing?" she asked, setting down her basket of goods. "It is time," he said, not meeting her eyes. "The passes will soon close with snow. My people have moved south toward the borderlands. I must take Tadi to them." Amelia felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Of course, she had known this day would come. Ahanu and Tadi could not stay hidden in her cabin forever. They belonged with their people. Yet the prospect of losing them, of returning to her solitary existence, was more painful than she had allowed herself to imagine. "I see," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "When will you leave?" "Tonight, under cover of darkness." Amelia nodded, turning away so he wouldn't see the tears that threatened. She moved to the cradle where Tadi napped, gently stroking his dark hair. "He will forget me," she whispered. "No," Ahanu said suddenly behind her. "I will tell him of the white woman with golden hair who saved him when I could not, who fed him from her own body, who loved him as her own." Amelia turned to face him, no longer hiding her tears. "Take me with you," she said, the words escaping before she could consider their implications. Ahanu's expression hardened. "You do not know what you ask. The journey is dangerous. And my people, They have no more reason to trust a white woman than your people have to trust an Apache. I have nothing here, Amelia insisted. Nothing but memories of loss and cruelty. Tadi is... She struggled to find the words. He is the child of my heart, if not my body. And what of me? Ahanu asked, his voice low and intense. What am I to you, Amelia Hoffman? The question struck her silent. What was Ahanu to her? A refugee she had sheltered? The father of the child she had come to love? Or something more, something she had not allowed herself to name? You are... she began, then faltered. You have become... Words failing her, Amelia did the only thing she could think of. She closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. For a moment, Ahanu remained frozen, unresponsive. Then, with a sound somewhere between a groan and a sigh, he pulled her against him, returning her kiss with unexpected fervor. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Ahanu rested his forehead against hers. This cannot be, he whispered. Our worlds have already crossed, Amelia countered. The moment I found Tadi, the moment you spared my life, we cannot go back to what was before. Ahanu stepped back, his expression troubled. My people move constantly, hunted by yours. It is no life for a white woman. I am no longer that woman, Amelia said firmly. That woman died with her husband, with her stillborn son. I am someone new now, someone who belongs neither here nor there. Let me choose where I belong. A cry from the cradle interrupted their standoff. Both moved automatically to attend to Tadi, their hands brushing as they reached for the child. Ahanu lifted his son, cradling him with the natural ease he had developed over their weeks together. We leave at nightfall, he finally said. Pack only what you can carry on your back. Where we go there are no cabins, no town, no certainty except the next day's journey. I understand, Amelia said, her heart lighter than it had been in months, despite the dangers ahead. As she gathered her few precious belongings, her sketchbook, a locket with a lock of her son's hair, medicines and essential supplies, Amelia felt not fear, but a strange sense of rightness, as if her life's broken pieces were finally finding a new pattern. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the New Mexico landscape in a blanket of white, erasing boundaries, softening edges, creating a world where distinctions blurred and new paths could be forged in unmarked terrain. They traveled by night, keeping to arroyos and canyons where their tracks would be hidden from searching eyes. Amelia rode behind Ahanu on the mare, Tadi secured in a cradleboard strapped to her chest. The winter cold bit through her layers, but she didn't complain, not when Ahanu endured the same with stoic determination, not when every mile took them further from pursuit and closer to a chance at a new life. On the third night, disaster struck. They had stopped to rest in a sheltered ravine, a small fire carefully screened to prevent its light from being seen. Tadi slept peacefully, and Amelia was sketching by firelight, Ahanu's profile as he kept watch, strong and vigilant against the night. The crack of a rifle shattered the silence. Ahanu moved with lightning speed, tackling Amelia and Tadi to the ground as bullets tore through the space where they had been sitting. "Crawl!" he hissed, pushing her toward a cluster of boulders. "Take Tadi. Do not move until I return." Ahanu, no. But he was already gone, melting into the darkness with only his knife in hand. Amelia clutched Tadi, who had awakened and begun to whimper at the commotion. She pressed the child close, whispering soothing words, straining to hear what was happening beyond their shelter. The sounds that came were terrifying. Shouts, a scuffle, another gunshot, then silence. Endless, terrible silence. Amelia counted her heartbeats, each one a prayer that Ahanu would return. 100 beats, 200. When she reached 500 with no sign of him, desperation overtook caution. Securing Tadi to her back, she crept from behind the boulders, a small knife clutched in her trembling hand. The campfire had died to embers, casting just enough light to navigate by. She found the first body just beyond their camp, a man in cavalry uniform, his throat cut in the decisive way of someone who couldn't risk the sound of a struggle. The second was nearby, fallen with his rifle still in hand. But where was Ahanu? A soft groan led her to him, collapsed against a juniper tree, blood darkening his side. "Ahanu!" she gasped, rushing to kneel beside him. "Scouts!" he managed through gritted teeth. "Two. There will be more. Amelia pulled back his shirt to examine the wound. A bullet had entered his side and exited through his back. Serious, but not immediately fatal if she could stop the bleeding. "We need to move," she said, tearing strips from her petticoat to fashion a bandage. "Can you ride?" Ahanu nodded grimly. "Must ride. Not safe." With strength born of desperation, Amelia helped him to his feet and onto the horse. She mounted behind him, one arm supporting his wounded body, the other securing Tadi, who miraculously remained quiet, as if the infant understood the gravity of their situation. They rode through the night, Ahanu drifting in and out of consciousness, Amelia following his mumbled directions. As dawn broke, they reached a steep canyon, its walls rising like sentinels against the pale sky. "There," Ahanu whispered, pointing to a narrow crevice barely visible among the rocks. "Hidden path." "My people." Amelia guided the exhausted horse into the passage, which widened as they progressed, eventually opening into a secluded valley. Smoke from cookfires rose in the distance, marking the presence of an encampment. As they approached, figures emerged from teepees, first curious, then alarmed at the sight of a wounded Ahanu supported by a white woman. Warriors surrounded them immediately, spears and rifles pointed at Amelia. Harsh voices barked questions in Apache, while women gathered the children behind them protectively. "Ahanu," Amelia pleaded, clutching his now unconscious form. "Ahanu, wake up. Tell them I'm with you." A dignified elder pushed through the crowd, his face lined with authority and age. He approached the horse, his eyes taking in the wounded Ahanu, the white woman, and the Apache infant secured to her back. "Who are you?" he demanded in accented English. "Why do you bring our son to us like this?" "Please," Amelia begged, tears streaming down her face. "He's been shot. He needs help. We were pursued. Cavalry scouts." The elder's expression remained impassive, but he barked orders that set the camp in motion. Warriors took Ahanu from the horse, carrying him to a large teepee. Others dispersed to secure the perimeter, while women approached cautiously to take Tadi. Amelia resisted instinctively, clutching the child tighter. "The child belongs with our women now," the elder said. "You have brought Ahanu home, that is enough." "No," Amelia said, finding strength in her desperation. "Tadi stays with me. I am the only mother he has known since the soldiers killed his own. My milk has fed him. My arms have held him. I belong with him and with Ahanu." Murmurs spread through the gathered Apache as her words were translated. The elder studied her with narrowed eyes. "You claim to be mother to an Apache child. You, a white woman." "I claim to love him," Amelia replied, "as I love his father." This declaration caused even greater commotion. The elder raised a hand for silence. "Ahanu brought you here," he acknowledged. "For that reason alone you may enter our camp. But make no mistake, you are not one of us, and you never will be. When Ahanu wakes, he will decide your fate." It was better than Amelia had dared hope. She dismounted shakily, Tadi still secured to her back, and followed as she was led to a smaller teepee at the edge of the camp. "You will stay here," a stern-faced woman told her. "Food will be brought. Do not leave this place." Alone with Tadi in the unfamiliar shelter, Amelia finally allowed herself to collapse, the tension of their flight giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. She wept silently, for Ahanu's wound, for the uncertainty of their future, for the home she had abandoned, and the precarious refuge they had found. Tadi's small hand patted her wet cheek, his dark eyes watching her with a wisdom that seemed impossible in one so young. "We'll be all right, little one," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Somehow, we'll be all right." As promised, food was brought, a simple stew and flat bread. The woman who delivered it regarded Amelia with undisguised suspicion, but paused when she saw Tadi nursing at Amelia's breast. "You feed him yourself?" she asked, her hostility momentarily softened by surprise. Amelia nodded. "Since I found him. My milk came when he needed it." The woman's expression shifted not to acceptance but to something less harsh. "This is a powerful sign," she said, before departing without further explanation. 3 days passed in this manner. Amelia was brought food and water, but no news of Ahanu. She was permitted to walk within sight of her assigned tipi under the watchful eyes of the camp. Children stared at her golden hair with curiosity, while the adults maintained a careful distance. On the 4th morning, The elder who had first greeted them appeared at her doorway. "Ahanu asks for you," he said without preamble. Clutching Tadi to her chest, Amelia followed the elder through the camp. Eyes tracked their progress, some curious, others hostile, a few, particularly among the women who had lost children, softening at the sight of Tadi's obvious attachment to his white caretaker. The large teepee, where Ahanu had been taken, was warm and filled with the scent of medicinal herbs. He lay on a bed of furs, his torso wrapped in bandages, his face drawn with pain, but his eyes clear and alert. "Amelia," he said, his voice weak but steady. "Tadi." She rushed to his side, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I thought I might lose you," she whispered, taking his hand. "It would take more than white man's bullets to separate me from my son," Ahanu replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And from you." The elder cleared his throat. "Ahanu, you must explain this woman's presence among us. The council demands to know your intentions." Ahanu struggled to sit up, grimacing with the effort. "Naku," he addressed the elder. "This woman saved my son when all others of his blood were slaughtered. She fed him from her own body. She tended my wounds. She abandoned her people to follow me to a life of hardship and danger." He looked directly at Amelia as he continued. "She is Tadi's mother now, and she is to be my wife." Gasps and murmurs filled the teepee as others gathered at the entrance, drawn by the shocking declaration. "This cannot be," Naku protested. "She is white, our enemy." "Was I not educated by whites at the mission school?" Ahanu countered. "Did I not learn their language, their ways? And did I become less Apache for this knowledge?" He took Amelia's hand firmly in his. "The soldiers who killed our people do not represent all whites, just as renegade raiders do not represent all Apache. Amelia has proven her heart. She has earned her place among us." Naku frowned deeply. "The council will not approve such a union." "Then we will leave," Ahanu said simply. "Tadi, Amelia, and I, we will find our own way." A woman pushed through the gathered crowd, elderly, her face deeply lined, her bearing dignified despite her advanced years. She spoke in rapid Apache, gesturing toward Amelia and Tadi. "What is she saying?" Amelia whispered to Ahanu. "She is Inala, our most respected medicine woman," he explained. "She says that a white woman whose milk comes for an Apache child carries strong medicine. That your arrival among us was foretold in her dreams, a golden-haired woman who would bring healing between our peoples." Inala approached Amelia, her gnarled hands reaching for Tadi. Reluctantly, Amelia allowed the old woman to take the child, watching anxiously as she examined him, murmuring words in her native tongue. After a moment, Inala returned Tadi to Amelia's arms, and then, to everyone's astonishment, placed her weathered hand on Amelia's head in what was clearly a gesture of blessing. She spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "She says you have the soul of an Apache mother," Ahanu translated, his voice thick with emotion. "That the spirits guided you to Tadi because they knew you would protect him with the fierceness of a she-wolf, that you belong among us if you have the courage to accept our ways." Amelia looked from Inala to Ahanu, then down at Tadi. "Tell her I do have the courage," she said. "Tell her I will learn your ways, honor your traditions, and raise Tadi to be proud of his heritage." As Ahanu translated, Inala nodded approvingly. She turned to address Naku and the others, speaking at length. The tension in the teepee gradually eased, replaced by reluctant acceptance, if not quite welcome. "Inala has decreed that you will stay," Naku finally announced. "She rarely speaks in council matters, but when she does, even the most stubborn warriors listen. You will be given time to prove yourself worthy of being called Apache." It was not a warm embrace, but it was a beginning. Amelia bowed her head respectfully to both Naku and Inala. "Thank you for this chance," she said. "I won't disappoint you." The weeks that followed tested Amelia in ways she had never imagined. As Ahanu recovered from his wound, she learned the daily tasks expected of Apache women: preparing food, tanning hides, weaving baskets, and caring for Tadi according to tribal customs. Her soft hands blistered and bled, then gradually toughened. Her fair skin darkened under the desert sun. Her golden hair, once her pride, she kept covered with a scarf out of respect for tribal sensibilities. The women of the tribe watched her efforts with initial skepticism, that slowly gave way to grudging respect. It was Tadi who ultimately bridged the gap. The healthy, thriving child was adored by all, and his obvious attachment to Amelia, the way he reached for her, the way he quieted at her touch, spoke louder than any words could. Keisha, a young mother who had lost her husband in a cavalry attack, was the first to offer friendship. She showed Amelia how to use yucca root to wash her hair, how to identify edible plants in the desert, how to carry Tadi in the traditional cradle board when traveling. "You try harder than any woman I know," Keisha observed one day as they worked together preparing meat for drying. "Why?" Amelia considered the question carefully. "Because I've been given a second chance at life," she finally replied. "At being a mother, at finding love. I won't waste it." Keisha nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The spirits rarely give such gifts without purpose. Inala believes you are here to help build a bridge between our peoples." "A bridge?" Amelia echoed, surprised. "But I've abandoned my people. Cut all ties." "Perhaps," Keisha said thoughtfully. "Or perhaps you are the first plank in a bridge yet to be built." The idea stayed with Amelia as spring arrived, bringing new growth to the desert and new strength to the tribe. They moved camp regularly, following traditional patterns while avoiding cavalry patrols. Ahanu, fully recovered, resumed his role as a respected warrior and healer, while also teaching Amelia the language and stories of his people. Their wedding ceremony took place beneath a full moon, with Inala officiating and most of the tribe in attendance. If some still looked upon the union with disapproval, they kept their peace out of respect for Ahanu's standing and Inala's blessing. Amelia wore a dress of soft deerskin, decorated with beadwork Keisha had helped her create. Her golden hair, now streaked with sun-bleached strands almost white, hung loose down her back, adorned with small feathers and shells that symbolized fertility and long life. As they stood before the sacred fire, hands bound together with a woven cord, Amelia felt a sense of completion she had never known in her former life of tea parties and social expectations. Here every task had meaning, every relationship was earned, every day was lived in full awareness of both its blessings and its dangers. When Ahanu spoke his vows in both Apache and English, promising to honor her courage and strength as well as her gentleness, tears streamed down Amelia's face. She responded in halting Apache, the words carefully practiced with Keisha's help, promising to stand beside him in all seasons, to care for his people as her own, to raise Tadi in the way of his ancestors. Inala sealed their union by wrapping their bound hands in sacred smoke, chanting prayers for protection and harmony. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, with dancing, feasting, and storytelling that welcomed Amelia, now given the Apache name Nahimana, meaning mystic, for her mysterious ability to feed Tadi, fully into the tribe. Summer brought both bounty and danger. As the tribe moved into higher elevations to escape the desert heat, they encountered increased cavalry activity. Treaties were being redrawn, reservations established, and pressure mounted on the remaining free Apache bands to surrender. "They will never understand our ways," Ahanu said one night as they lay together beneath the stars, Tadi sleeping peacefully between them. "They see only what they want to see, savages to be tamed or eliminated." Amelia traced the scar on his side, a permanent reminder of how close she had come to losing him. "Not all of them are blind," she said. "There are those who speak for peace, for understanding. They are few, but they exist." Ahanu captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. "You still believe your people and mine can find common ground?" "I have to believe it," she replied. "For Tadi's sake, for the sake of all children, Apache and white." Their conversation was interrupted by urgent shouts from the perimeter of the camp. Ahanu was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. "Stay here," he ordered, disappearing into the darkness. Amelia gathered Tadi, now a sturdy toddler, into her arms, her heart pounding as she awaited news. The commotion grew, voices raised in anger and confusion. When Ahanu returned, his expression was grim. "Riders approach, many riders, soldiers." "How did they find us?" Amelia gasped. "We've been so careful." "A trader betrayed our location," he said, already gathering essentials. "We must move. Now." The camp erupted into controlled chaos as families quickly dismantled teepees and packed belongings. The elderly and children were sent ahead with escorts, while warriors prepared to cover their retreat. You must go with the women and children, Ahanu told Amelia, strapping on his weapons. No, she protested. My place is with you. Your place is with our son, he corrected gently. If something happens to me, Tadi will need his mother. The truth of his words struck her with painful clarity. She was a mother first, a warrior's wife second. Gathering Tadi and their few possessions, she joined the line of women and children being led into the mountains by trusted scouts. As they crested a ridge, Amelia looked back. In the valley below, she could see the approaching cavalry, their uniforms stark against the landscape. And there, forming a line of defense, were Ahanu and the other warriors, buying precious time for their families to escape. Please, she whispered to whatever spirits might be listening, let him return to us. The refugees traveled through the night, climbing higher into terrain too difficult for cavalry horses to navigate. By dawn, they had reached a hidden valley known only to the tribe, a sanctuary used in times of greatest danger. Hours passed with no word from the warriors. Amelia kept Tadi distracted with games and stories, all while her mind conjured images of Ahanu wounded or captured, or worse. When the first warriors finally arrived, exhausted but triumphant, she searched frantically for Ahanu among them. He was not there. The soldiers pursued us into the canyon, one warrior explained to the anxious families. We led them into the narrow passage where the rocks are unstable. A rock slide, another added with grim satisfaction. Many soldiers buried, the others retreated. And Ahanu, Amelia demanded, her voice breaking. Where is my husband? The warriors exchanged glances. He stayed behind with 3 others, the first warrior finally said, to ensure the soldiers did not follow our true trail. He ordered us to return to the families. Keisha put a comforting arm around Amelia's shoulders. Ahanu is clever and knows these mountains better than any. He will return. Amelia nodded, clinging to this hope as the day wore on. She kept busy, helping to establish the temporary camp, preparing food, tending to Tadi. But her eyes constantly scanned the trail leading into the valley, watching for any sign of Ahanu. Night fell. The camp grew quiet, except for the soft sounds of mothers singing their children to sleep. Amelia sat outside their hastily erected shelter, Tadi sleeping within, her sketchbook open on her lap. By firelight, she drew Ahanu's face from memory, the strong lines of his jaw, the depth of his eyes, the subtle curve of his lips when he smiled, which was rarely enough to make each instance precious. You capture his spirit well. The voice startled her. Looking up, she saw Inala lowering herself to sit beside her. I'm afraid, Amelia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Afraid I'll never see him again. Inala nodded, her ancient eyes reflecting the firelight. Fear is the shadow cast by love, she said in her accented English. The deeper the love, the darker the fear. Does your medicine tell you if he lives? Amelia asked, desperate for reassurance. My medicine tells me that some bonds cannot be broken by death, Inala replied. The bond between you and Ahanu is such a one. Whether in this world or the spirit world, you will meet again. It was not the comfort Amelia had hoped for, but there was wisdom in the old woman's words. Thank you for accepting me, she said, for giving me a place among your people. Inala touched Amelia's golden hair, now braided in the Apache style. You earned your place, by loving what we love, by respecting our ways, by bringing life where there was death. She rose slowly to her feet. Rest now. Tomorrow brings its own medicine. After Inala departed, Amelia remained by the fire, adding details to her sketch until exhaustion finally drove her to lie beside Tadi in their shelter. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of Ahanu calling her name across vast distances. She awoke before dawn to Tadi's excited babbling. Papa! Papa! Bolting upright, Amelia looked toward the entrance of their shelter, and there, silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky, stood Ahanu, dirty, bloodied, exhausted, but gloriously, miraculously alive. With a cry of joy, she launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over in her exuberance. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair, his body trembling with fatigue and relief. I feared I'd lost you, she wept against his chest. I promised you a life together, he reminded her. I keep my promises. Tadi, not to be left out, wrapped himself around Ahanu's legs, chattering excitedly in a mix of English and Apache. Ahanu swept the boy up with his free arm, completing the circle of their reunion. As the sun rose over the valley, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber, Amelia looked at her husband and son, her family forged in fire and blood, in loss and love, and knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. By winter, the pressure on the free Apache bands had intensified. More tribes had been forced onto reservations, and those who resisted faced increasingly brutal campaigns. Ahanu's small band, one of the few still maintaining their traditional way of life, moved constantly, always one step ahead of the cavalry patrols. The strain began to tell on everyone, particularly the children and the elderly. Food became scarce as they were pushed into less fertile territories. Illness spread more readily with people weakened by hunger and constant movement. "We cannot continue this way," Ahanu acknowledged during a council meeting. "Our children grow thin. Our elders grow weak. The soldiers will not stop until all Apache are on reservations or dead." "You suggest surrender?" Naku asked, his voice sharp with disapproval. "I suggest survival," Ahanu replied. "There is another way, across the border into Mexico. The mountains there are familiar to our people. The Mexican soldiers have their own troubles and pay less attention to the borderlands." The discussion grew heated, with many voices raised both for and against the plan. Amelia, now accepted at such gatherings as Ahanu's wife, listened intently. When the arguments had circled several times, she rose to speak. "May I offer a thought?" she asked, still careful of her place despite her integration into the tribe. Naku nodded grudgingly, and the others fell silent. "I have lived among you for more than a year now," she began. "I have learned your ways, shared your hardships, celebrated your joys. I have seen the strength and dignity with which you face each challenge." She paused, looking around the circle. "But I have also seen the toll this constant fleeing takes on our people. The children no longer play with the same spirit. The mother's eyes grow dark with worry." She turned to Ahanu, drawing strength from his supportive gaze. "My husband speaks wisdom. Across the border, our people might find space to breathe, to rebuild, to live according to the old ways for a time longer. It is not surrender, it is strategic retreat to fight another day." Inala, who rarely spoke at council, but whose opinion carried enormous weight, nodded slowly. "The white woman sees clearly," she said. "Sometimes the tree that bends in the storm outlives the one that stands rigid." After much further debate, the decision was made. The tribe would journey south, crossing into Mexico, where the mountains created a natural corridor between nations. They would establish a new camp in the Sierra Madre, where other Apache bands had found refuge. The journey would be arduous, particularly in winter, but less dangerous than remaining in the path of the increasing cavalry patrols. Preparations began immediately, with every member of the tribe contributing according to their abilities. As Amelia packed their belongings, a small item fell from between the folds of a blanket, her locket containing the lock of Thomas's hair. She had not opened it in many months, her heart too full of Tadi and Ahanu to dwell on past sorrows. Now she carefully pried it open, looking at the tiny golden curl that had been cut from her stillborn son's head. Tears welled in her eyes as she thought of how different her life might have been had Thomas lived. A life of comfort and social standing, but also of constraints and prejudices she now recognized for what they were. "Amelia?" Ahanu's voice pulled her from her reverie. "It is time." She nodded, closing the locket and tucking it securely among her possessions. As she stepped outside, Tadi ran to her, his dark eyes bright with excitement at the bustle of activity around him. "Mama, go mountains!" he exclaimed, pointing south. "Yes, little one," she agreed, lifting him into her arms. "We're going to the mountains, to a new home." Ahanu watched them, his expression softening, as it always did, when he observed the bond between his wife and son. "You have doubts?" he asked perceptively. Amelia shook her head. "Not doubts, just remembering. The path that brought me here." He nodded, understanding. "The spirits weave our paths in patterns we cannot see until we have walked them," he said. "Your path led you from one world to another, but always toward love." "Always toward love," she echoed, reaching for his hand. As the tribe began their journey southward, moving in a long, disciplined column through the winter landscape, Amelia rode beside Ahanu, Tadi secured in his cradleboard against her chest. Behind them lay the ashes of her former life, the society that had rejected her, the conventions that had constrained her, the prejudices that had nearly destroyed her. Ahead lay uncertainty, hardship, and danger, but also freedom, purpose, and belonging. The sun broke through the clouds as they crested a ridge, bathing the distant mountains in golden light. Amelia felt a surge of hope so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. They would face whatever came together, Ahanu, herself, and Tadi, a family forged in the crucible of a world that had tried to keep them apart, but ultimately made them stronger in their union. "Look, Tadi," she whispered to her son, pointing toward the sunlit peaks. "That's where we're going. That's our future." The child followed her gesture, his eyes wide with wonder at the golden mountains rising from the desert floor. Beside them, Ahanu reached over to take Amelia's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that needed no words. As they rode forward into an uncertain future, Amelia knew with unshakable certainty that she had found what few ever truly discover, not just love, but belonging. Not just survival, but living fully, with purpose and passion. Not just a family, but a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. In the heart of the American frontier, against all odds and defying all expectations, a white woman and an Apache warrior had found in each other not an enemy, but a kindred spirit. And in doing so, they had created something precious and rare, a bridge between worlds, a testament to the power of love to transcend boundaries of blood and belonging. The end. Dear listener, as we close the final chapter of Amelia and Ahanu's journey, perhaps you find yourself touched by the echo of their courage across time. Their story may be set in the distant landscape of the 1872 New Mexico territory, but the truths they discovered speak directly to our hearts today. Like Amelia, many of us have experienced times when the life we carefully built crumbled beneath our feet. The loss of a loved one, a dream unfulfilled, or the painful rejection by those we thought would stand beside us. In those dark moments, we may feel utterly alone, cast out into our own wilderness. But remember this, it is often in our deepest suffering that unexpected doors open. When Amelia found baby Tadi among the ashes of destruction, her broken heart became capable of a new kind of love, one that transcended boundaries of blood and culture. Her greatest pain became the pathway to her greatest purpose. In your own life's journey, the wounds you carry are not simply scars to be hidden, but perhaps the very places through which your unique light will shine most brightly. The prejudices Amelia and Ahanu faced may seem distant to us now, but we all know what it means to be judged, misunderstood, or excluded. As you rest tonight, take comfort in knowing that human courage is timeless. The strength that allowed Amelia to leave behind everything familiar for an uncertain future lives within you too. The wisdom that enabled Ahanu to see beyond appearances, to recognize the true heart of another person, is wisdom you also possess. Your life story, with all its unexpected turns, is still being written. There is no trail so difficult, no desert so vast that it cannot be crossed with perseverance and love. The family you build, whether of blood or of choice, is your true legacy in this world. May you find, like Amelia and Ahanu, that love is the most powerful bridge between worlds. May you discover, in your own way, that belonging is not about where you started, but where your heart finally finds its home. And may you remember, especially in your darkest hours, that the dawn always returns, painting even the most rugged mountains with golden light. Rest peacefully tonight, protected by the same stars that watched over countless generations before us. Tomorrow is waiting with its own possibilities, its own chances for courage, for connection, for love. With deepest gratitude, Wild West Whispers team. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of Amelia and Ahanu's incredible journey. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support, from the bottom of our hearts, helps us stay motivated to create even more stories filled with love, redemption, and emotional twists that bring us all closer together. At the end of this video, another beautiful story will appear. Click and be surprised by yet another unforgettable tale of courage, love, and hope.